The lady by the lake and I are soulmates. She just doesn't know it yet. The day we met was the happiest day of my life. Well, technically speaking, we never actually met, but it was still romantic. She was sitting barefoot on a grassy knoll, singing the most enchanting melody you could ever hope to hear, while I watched quietly from afar. When she got up to leave, I shouted, "Wait!" But she just picked up her dress and strolled right across the lake. I couldn't say for certain, but it looked like strange white stones were rising to the surface, creating a path for her to cross. By the time I reached the shore, both she and the stones had vanished. I went back the next day. Just like before, she sang like an angel, then disappeared over the water, leaving me heartbroken and alone. It happened time and time again. Each missed encounter made me more determined to win her affections. She was in my thoughts morning, noon, and night. I just knew we were destined to be together. If she'd only turned around once, fate would have taken care of the rest. Nothing else mattered to me. Before long, the idea of us apart was so unbearable. The next time she crossed the lake, I charged in after her. As the ice-cold water rose to my ankles, a voice in my head screamed, "Turn back!" But I couldn't. She was so close. The lake got deeper, so I swam forwards, shivering the entire time. I tried calling to her, but could barely manage a whimper. That's when I realized she wasn't being supported by white stones. I was close enough now to see pale hands extending from the bottom of the lake, forming a path for her to step over. The same hands that had been keeping her afloat moments earlier pulled me down to the lake bed, imprisoning me amongst a sea of ghostly figures, pinned together, shoulder to shoulder. No matter how hard I fought, I couldn't escape the horde of bodies. All I could do was extend my fingertips to the surface. I tried to scream, but foul-tasting water invaded my throat and pierced my insides. In an instant, she was gone, and I was trapped. To this day, I'm still stuck in that exact same spot. I know it sounds awful, but it's not all bad. Even after all these years, my darling still comes out to sing every day. That means I get to help her across the lake and listen to that beautiful voice. And things will get better. Sooner or later, she'll realize I'm down here. How could she not? In the meantime, I keep her safe. You wouldn't believe how many lovesick idiots charge into the lake trying to catch her eye. It's okay, though. They all get dealt with. Nothing's going to stand between me and my love. Her and I will be together forever. You'll see. My family used to go on vacation to my grandma's lake house in the summer. It always started out as my favorite time of the year, since it was so far from the city. This meant I could see the stars at night, or hear the sounds of nature, rather than the hissing of vehicles burning fuel. It was so much fun, the stuff childhoods were made of. The only thing I didn't like was Grandma. She was pleasant enough when around my parents or siblings, but when it was just us two, she was weird, especially when we were next to the lake. "There is a monster in the dark," my grandmother would whisper only to me. It pulls its prey into the abyss to feed. I would deliberately laugh at her comments because I felt like she wanted to scare me, on purpose. I'd say that she was crazy, then go and do something else. But as the vacation continued and her comments ate away at me, I'd slowly grow more and more terrified of the still water. I was always relieved when we left Grandma's and made our way home. Grandma died when I was 17 years old, and that summer my family planned to go for another vacation to help clear out the last of her belongings. The property had been left to my mother, and she wanted to redecorate, but I didn't fancy going. Maybe it was because I felt too old for family holidays. Or maybe, and more realistically, it was because of the bad memories. Either way, I decided to stay back. Everyone understood and agreed that I'd come with them next year, before I went off to college. And with hugs and goodbyes, they drove off, and I was left with the house to myself for a few weeks. Junk food, video games, occasional hangouts with friends. It was going to be a dream come true. The sensation of being home alone didn't hit me until that night. I was relaxing on the sofa, flicking through channels and trying to not fall asleep, before finally giving up. I figured it was time for bed. Turning the TV off, I was suddenly met with how quiet the house was. How still and empty it was. My heart began to pump faster as my imagination suddenly activated. Childhood fears that my rational mind knew were bogus suddenly felt alive. Images began to flow through my mind of people standing behind doorways, of creatures under the bed. And then through my terror, as I moved to step off the sofa towards the light switch, my grandma's voice entered my mind. There is a monster in the dark. My grandmother would whisper only to me. It pulls its prey into the abyss to feed. And as my foot touched the carpeted floor, I screamed as something in the dark grabbed my ankle. Grandma never said the monster was in the water. It was supposed to be the perfect getaway for me and my wife, Deborah. We had both earned the break from the kids, and Deborah's parents were more than happy to take care of their beloved grandchildren for the weekend. I rented a cabin in the woods, and when we arrived, it was far more beautiful than we had imagined. It stood amongst the backdrop of a scenic lake view. The ambiance of the forest was calming, and the air was fresh. The interior of the cabin had a cozy feel to it, and its beauty matched that of the exterior. It felt very homey. On the wall above the fireplace was an odd painting depicting a mustached man dressed in 1800s attire, with a rifle in his hands, standing with one foot on a very strange-looking animal. The animal had the shape of a human, yet its head was terribly elongated, and its emaciated body was covered by jet-black skin. But the thing that stood out the most was the huge elk-like antlers protruding from its head. "Well, that's creepy," Deborah said, as she gazed at the painting. She was right, it was creepy. Later that night, as I was brushing my teeth, I heard Deborah scream from the bedroom. I rushed to her, and when I saw her face, she was ghostly pale. "Something's outside. I saw it looking through the window," Deborah said, panicking. I looked outside the window and saw nothing. It's probably just some animal, I said, trying to calm her down. To reassure her, I went outside to look around, while she stayed inside. It was unusually quiet. The air was still, and the sounds one would expect to hear in the woods at night were absent. I was met by utter silence, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking in the dark forest, watching me. I searched around the lake, and I saw a shed in the distance, and I went to check it out. The wooden door was locked by a very old and rusty padlock. With one swift kick, the door opened. Inside was a table, and on the wall above the table were antlers. On the table was a box. When I opened it, there was a single letter inside that read, November, 1892. There are creatures on these grounds that do not belong to God. Beware the hunger, they will curse upon you. I couldn't save my daughter from the ravenous hunger that drove her to kill and feast on her own mother. The natives call them wendigos. I have hunted them for 10 years and killed 5 of them, but my hunger is too much now. After this is written, I am going to go into the woods and end my life. Beware the hunger. I put the letter in my pocket and went to check on Deborah. When I walked into the bedroom, I was horrified. Deborah was covered in blood, eating her own fingers. On this beautiful Saturday afternoon, the young family arrived at the lake and found a perfect spot to relax and wade in the water. Mom laid down the blanket on a patch of grass as the kids grabbed their flotation toys and goggles. Dad told everyone he was going to be the first in the water, stepping back and jumping into the deep water a few feet ahead. "The water is perfect," he called back as he waded further out. He wondered how deep it got, past where he was wading, and dumped his head under to take a look. He opened his eyes and peered through the blurriness of the water. That's when he saw what he assumed was a bunch of branches or dead trees below. He squinted harder, the water pressing against his eyes, keeping his sight unclear. Something about what he saw was not right. He swam back to the surface and called over for the kids to toss him their goggles. He caught them as they were tossed through the air and stretched the rubber band over his head. Back under he went, and immediately his body froze when he looked underneath. At the bottom of the lake were dozens of dead bodies, all in various states of decay, their limbs all tangled together. Pale-skinned and some more recently dead, others clearly there for much longer. Dad splashed his head above the water and immediately yelled out for everyone to stay out of the water. Mom and the kids were on the shore, all staring at him and calling out, asking, "What's going on?" Dad was swimming, quickening his pace, his legs kicking as he tried to get back as fast as possible. Then he felt a grasp on his leg. He cried out, kicking his leg with fright. The grip on whatever was grabbing him loosened. He stopped and looked down, unable to see anything. Surely there was no way someone was alive and trying to grab for help. Panicked, he snapped the goggles on and peered down, looking frantically. The sight of the bodies again made his heart race, his limbs loosening their strength. He lifted his head above the surface again and began his swim towards the shore, before coming to an absolute halt, out of breath and terrified. Mom and the kids were gone. their belongings still there, but no one in sight. Dad called out, but no answer. He kicked his legs again to keep swimming. Then suddenly the grip on his leg was back. But this time, it wasn't letting go. Dad kicked his leg, but the hand was pulling his leg with more strength than he could fight. Suddenly, he was yanked harder than he was before, and he was fully underwater. Looking down, he saw Mom with her hand on his leg. Below her, the kids were pulling on her leg. Below them, the bodies linked together, all pulling him down into the corpses below. Like a human chain. July 7th, 1984. Anderson Residence, Mount Harmon, Maine. At approximately 6 p.m., Gwen Anderson states her husband, Gregory, answered a phone call. She relays that his demeanor changed considerably afterwards. She says he ended the phone call and was silent for the rest of the evening. When she asked who had called, she recounts Gregory refused to answer. The following morning, Gwen placed a call to local authorities after being unable to locate her husband. It was noted that his vehicle and wallet were still at the residence. State troopers were called in to aid in the search and were unable to locate Gregory. July 12, 1984. Exit 11, I-95 North, Edensport, Maine. A woman sees a man emerge from the trees and walk into the roadway. She is forced to swerve to avoid him. The man then tells her he is injured and is in need of medical attention. She brings him to the hospital where he is treated. Due to the unusual nature of his injuries and inconsistent account of what caused them, the police are called in. During the interview, he tells them that he is Gregory Anderson. He is detained and brought in for more questioning. Police make a call to Gwen Anderson to tell her that her husband has been found. While he is questioned, she makes a drive to the station. Upon seeing him, she states, "That is not my husband." When asked a series of questions that Gregory would know, he is unable to answer them. Asked about his disappearance, he declines to answer. He is later admitted to a psychiatric facility to determine his mental state, after dental records confirm his identity. July 16, 1984. Pearl Lake, Newton, Maine. At 5:15 p.m., the body of a man is recovered from the shoreline after being spotted by a fisherman. He is identified as Michael Durgin at the morgue. His time of death is determined to be at approximately 7 a.m. that morning, though his brother Connor insists that he had lunch with him that day. He states that Michael had seemed off, like something was wrong or he was sick. He seemed confused. Connor is taken in as a possible suspect and later released, though continues to believe he had seen his brother after his death had taken place. July 17, 1984. Great Eats, Capleton, Maine. Two unidentified men entered the diner at approximately 6 p.m. A waitress notes their behavior as suspicious and eavesdrops as one of the men uses a payphone. He asked the operator to connect him to an address in Mount Harmon, Maine. She states that during the call, he spoke in a language that she did not recognize. The owner then tells the men to leave if they are not ordering food. They are cordial and explain they are lost and needed directions. When asked their destination, they reply Newton, Maine. July 18, 1984, Edensport, Maine. Newton, Maine. Gregory Anderson disappears from the psychiatric ward. Michael Durgin's body disappears from the morgue.